So here's the problem that I have. We are going to talk about something tonight called Deepvault. And I've got 100 ideas. Like 100 ideas.
Well, from what I know of Deepvault, and the important thing about this podcast is we don't really know much about this. So you came with some ideas, and I, of course, have some ideas of my own, but we haven't fleshed anything out.
And this is very important to say. I don't think that any of mine are fully developed or great, and that's the problem. They're scattered.
You've said the word super dungeon before.
Yes.
In regards to Deepvault. So I feel like if you don't have 100 ideas, you don't have nearly enough ideas for a Deepvault.
No, it's
super
true.
dungeon.
So can we just talk about what has been established before we do this?
Yes.
So that we can keep the spirit of damage reduction in place. The name Deepvault has been established. So we know we want to call this super dungeon in our world Deepvault. This was an interesting situation that we were in. Because we had to get descriptions of items, NPCs, and monsters to an artist basically before we knew exactly what Deepvault was going to be.
Exactly. And then part of the problem is, so that happened before we're doing this podcast, but Deepvault was eventually put on hold because some things changed around, and so we have a little more time to think about it, but we're in a position now where we already have ideas, and as far as I know, already have art for this thing that we're making.
Exactly.
But we haven't really talked about it at all.
No.
I will say there are a few implied things. One of them is it's underground.
It
likely has a lock on the door.
Right.
Like the vault.
Deep vault. We're in a unique situation right now that we have art that meant something to us when we had a deadline previously. And we said, okay, we need to come up with these reasons and character descriptions and item descriptions and send them to this artist. And he killed it. The artist is Brendan Murphy. He did such a good job.
Yeah, really good art.
But James and I were talking, and we wanted to pull just a full-on Tabletop Terrors. From a world-building perspective, in the spirit of damage reduction, nothing is sacred, nothing is established, and we can retcon anything and invent it as we go now. And that's what we're going to do.
To throw in one more little interesting thing, I think, is, so damage reduction, the idea is a lot of this is workshopping. A lot of this is just doing our best to spitball stuff, figure stuff out, and sometimes we walk away with a pretty solid idea of what a concept is or how something is going to work, but it's rarely canon. This I think will be the first instance where stuff we talk about now will eventually be officially canonized in a supplement.
I agree.
I think it still could conceivably be retconned in the future, like way if we had to change something,
Sure.
But it will be about as official as any of our stuff has been outside of Trapsmiths and Tieflings, because those were also canon. So this will mark like the first damage reduction that becomes canon in the near future.
Right. And
just as an interesting sort of tidbit.
No, and I think that's really, it's a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
But I like this, and I think that as far as the world building aspects here, sometimes you're going to have to start with something that you already have that exists.
Yeah.
And do something else with it.
Or sometimes you have the beginning of an idea or the lead in. You've created my characters need to go somewhere that is an underground city that has a dragon in it.
Exactly.
Whatever. And you're like, all right, well, I'm creating an underground city and it has to have a dragon in it because that's where the characters need to go. Sometimes you'll start with parameters.
Right.
That you're like, okay, this place has to have these things, but beyond that, nothing else matters.
And so, I want to throw it to you first.
All right.
So, where do you want to start? We have the name Deepvault. Obviously, we talked about it's going to be underground and probably have a lock on it. But what's the cool thing? What's the thing that's going to inspire me to now go and write this supplement and just kill it?
Well, see, okay, so that's two different things. Where I would start and what would be the cool thing, where I would start is in my mind, I think, okay, how do people get there? Where is it that people would be able to go there or very likely not be able to go there? It's probably on a place that you can just drive by like, oh, let's hit McDonald's and on the way we'll stop by Deepvault.
Right.
It's like, so that is the thing that I'm most curious about personally right now. But to answer your second question, I think we'll start with the most obvious thing, which is, okay, vaults generally hold stuff.
Yeah.
So what is this vault holding protecting or keeping in, is what I would probably first focus on. Like, okay, that's the hook. That's the reason people love Deepvault, is the point. Whatever's in there.
Yeah.
I don't know what's in there, but I think that's the thing that would inspire. That would inspire me and hopefully inspire you to write it.
So, my thought process here was sort of to set the tone. In our world, there are beings known as Titans, I think. And these Titans are like proto-gods.
Mm-hmm.
They are, if nothing else, they are equal to the gods, but opposite in many ways.
Yeah.
Like if the gods were, because I don't want to belittle them. I don't want to belittle the gods of the world or make them sound like they're just walking around with big, protruding Promethean jaws.
Yeah,
where it's
when you say it like that, the way I kind of imagine it is, there are animals that are the kings of their own particular areas, and if they fought, one might win or the other might win, depending. Say if you fought a black bear with a panther, I'm like, maybe those things occur in the same places, but like if those are separate entirely, and one day somebody put them together and they fought, I'm like, well, no, they are both respectively their own things.
Yeah.
But, usually it's like the gods, or that's it. That's the end. But
Right.
in my mind, I'm like, well, yeah, but there's the gods, and there are things that are equal, but like vertical to the gods, or horizontal, I guess it's better. Horizontal to the gods, where it's like they're on the same plane, but they don't hang out all the time. They're not constantly fighting each other, maybe, or...
Right. Now, to me, the gods would be more... primitive is the wrong word, but I don't know how to say
like
it.
Old world, like ancient, like the...
Sort of like that.
The Titans are like a little more New Age.
They are.
in
They're
a way.
more... I feel like they're more technologically focused, even for that sort of old fantasy sort of realm. So, and I want to be really careful what we dance around as far as calling it technology, but I don't know. I'm going to just spitball here and say that to me, the Titans would have ancient stone vessels that could, hover above the planet, and they would have projectile weapons. Like almost, a good frame of reference would be something like Stargate.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That old look, where, in Stargate it was that ancient Egyptian sort of look. Well, to me, I don't know. I don't know if the Titans would have one particular look. I feel like depending on the different types, but
and I was actually going to say that in another, I think, better example, I used the example of animals, but I actually realized that they're different cultures, I feel. Like, imagine if the gods lived in one country and the Titans lived in another.
Right.
It's like they're going to not exist, progress at different rates or come up with different things of themselves or otherwise. It's like, yeah, they were more technologically advanced, where the gods were potentially more concerned with, say, magic, or something else was occupying their time, or they didn't have a great mind that came up with some of these great technological things.
I actually like that a lot. I like that maybe the gods were more bent towards arcane and divine.
Exactly.
And the Titans, this is tough because it's a sort of, I tell you this to tell you that, but one of the forces we talked about existing in our world is a separate creation force called immanence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe the Titans were more about mastering that creation force rather than arcane and divine magic.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense.
I don't. Again, we don't have the specifics on that, but
all that to say,
right? All that to say, what if Deepvault was supposed to be the perfect utopia during one of the great scorchings or one of the great wars? The Titans said, we're tired of fighting.
Yeah.
Everything. We're tired of trying to convince other beings that our way is a good way. And you know what? We're going to just go. We're going to come under here and we're going to lock ourselves in. But of course, something goes terribly wrong.
Okay, well, do you have an idea of what goes wrong? Because I have a little bit of a different idea that I think is cool, but kind of changes your idea.
Which is fine. No, that's fine. If I had to say something right now, if I had to say, okay, here's what I would think. It's very interesting to me. If you took the Titans and took the fact that their utopia was perfect in design, and it was this, I almost feel like it was an ever-growing, changing sort of, it's like if you had ancient nanotechnology.
Yeah.
Right? Now, again, it's
like a living area.
Yes. That is designed to grow and change based on the needs of the people inside. But the Titans, say there's 8 of them or something, who locked themselves in there, they were the reason that it went wrong because they began to fight each other, even though it was against their nature.
Exactly. So like you said, on paper, it was the perfect utopia, but they didn't account for the fact that they would then be putting in potentially, human-like personalities, personalities that had flaws, and they would fight each other.
And that's my thought is that, everyone had a different creative vision. It started out unified, but then it started to branch off over, no, I think we need to discover a way to defeat the dragons. Well, no, that's foolish. We need to discover a way to travel through dimensions. No, we need to... And then it started to become...
It started to break down.
Yeah. And then I think over eons and centuries, what have you, at least this group of Titans, I imagine that their corpses are in there.
Okay,
everything went terribly wrong, and the dungeon is like eating them, kind of thing.
So that's all awesome, but just consider, and maybe we'll mash them together. Maybe you won't like this at all, and we don't have to go with it.
No, go to town, man. Go to town.
But consider, okay, so what I mentioned earlier was, why is it not a thing that everybody knows about? Now, we didn't establish that it's a thing that everybody knows about, but I'm assuming it's not. Like I said, it's not marked on the map. It's like, this is Deepvault. This is not a...
It's legendary at best.
Okay, so what if the Titans and the gods were always fighting? I know I mentioned something earlier, like they weren't in an example, but if they were always fighting...
Sure, or at least at odds.
Exactly, they would... Okay, yeah, so it was almost like constant world wars. Like, they were at odds, and then one would get the upper hand, and they would fight, and they would sort of win for a while. And then the other side would build themselves back up, and it would go back and forth. But they were these awful, devastating wars.
Right.
So I like what you said, but they kept it a secret from the gods. They said, all right.
Ooh, yeah.
Basically, we're going to fight, but we are going to hide all of our technology. The world is nearly destroyed at this point. The world is nothing but a battleground for the gods and the Titans at this point. There aren't humans or other races. We're talking ancient. They're just fighting. The Titans have this really good idea, like, oh, okay, we'll make a vault. We will make a place for us to live so that when this scorching or world-destroying event happens, we have the upper hand. Yeah. We save all of our technology, we put it all down there, and don't tell the gods about it, so that when they win, or think they win, or if the Titans win, they have the extra upper hand, because everybody ends up eventually having to start from scratch to some degree.
Oh, I love that.
Because their whole, their ranks were completely devastated, and it was just a war of attrition. And then finally the Titans thought, okay, well, what if we had the upper hand? What if we made a secret vault where we kept our most important things to bring it out at the last minute? They're not destroyed.
I love it.
So I like that style of idea. Now, the rest of it, I think, works perfectly as well, with that same idea, where that was the idea, it was all unified, and then it totally didn't work because, people are people.
And, that's the thing. The number one thing that popped into my head when you were saying all that, the reason why it failed, betrayal.
Okay, yeah.
Someone said, you know what? I bet we could convince the gods to work with us. I bet, something where it was just this. Or it could just be sheer, I don't even know the emotion, but...
Well, I would...
Spite.
Oh, okay.
Someone
spite
who,
is good.
For instance, someone who religiously believed, we are not to hide underground.
Oh, okay.
We are not to run away. But they went along with the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when they got down there, they basically sent up a beacon and said, come get us. We're gonna... Or, I don't know.
Now, the main thing is I do like the idea of the Titans destroying their own utopia. I like the idea that the gods have nothing to do with the destruction of Deepvault. Or the
Sure.
downfall of Deepvault. I love that it's their own fault.
Yeah, I'm down with that.
I really love that. But I love the idea that the betrayal is what causes it. Whether, so of course they would be working with the gods, but maybe it was something more like, okay, he betrays them, but not... He doesn't say, "Hey, gods, come get us." He, this betrayer Titan knows that it's impregnable, this fortress that they've created, and he knows. So maybe he, sabotages something else. Tries to come up with a way to force them out of Deepvault. That's the point. He goes in there, like you said, and he lives, and he tries to force them out, and then something happens where it's, he didn't realize, he didn't account for the fact that other things were working behind the scenes, and they were unable to leave. So in his mind, it was like, oh, betrayal, and then I'm going to go, I'm going to meet the gods, and they're going to pay me. Whatever.
No, and I love all this. And so we have our framing of a very broad stroke, a very ancient stroke of how, roughly.
Yeah.
So here's where I think this thing's a super dungeon, and where it kind of, like, how does it factor into today if adventurers wandered in there or found it? I think this Utopia, it was based upon the concepts and the ideas of researching, and it's basically a huge underground lab.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, it still is utopian. It's not like a bunch of titans in lab coats,
Yeah.
But the idea is their society is built upon the curiosity of creation.
Yeah, I see it as a utopia, like the idea being they've found a way to sustain themselves infinitely. They've found a way to control population. They've solved all of the problems that require people to work.
Exactly.
So instead of work, they're like, hey, you don't have a job. We all work together to discover a new way. We've figured out how to feed each other. We've figured out how to clothe each other. We've handled all of that while staying underground. Now time for science.
Right. And if you take a bunch of people who share the same principles, the same sorts of ideals, and the same interests and passions, they're going to have the shared idea of utopia.
Exactly.
In other words, it's like a utopia for a bunch of gamers is going to be different than a utopia for a bunch of hunters in our modern day.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same way, it's like, yeah, guys, come on, let's all... Now, of course, we're stripping this down to very basic human emotions and assigning them to gods, which we can tighten down later. Ha!
Get it?
Didn't even do that on purpose. So, I like the idea, and this is a trope, if I ever said a trope to you. Something went terribly wrong. It's the classic, like, I don't know if I want it to be like xenomorphs running around down there. But yeah, something like old school, like, but they dug too deep.
Can I be the guy? I know that's a trope. You said that's a trope.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a sip of my my soda with ice in it, so you're going to hear it.
You're going to hear, just going for it, folks.
I'm just...
Full bore.
I could
This
see
is a Monday night podcast. That never happened.
I know. And I could see this soda, and I'm like, oh, it's like the sweat is dripping off the cup. I'm like, dude, I need a sip of that right now. It's my reward. Go on, though.
Okay, so I'm going to be the guy that tells you what this is reminiscent of. Because I want to be the guy before someone else is the guy.
Oh, all right.
So I'm technically being a good guy here. A lot of what we've described sounds a lot like the game BioShock. They created a utopia where they could work by themselves, and it was apart from everybody, underwater in this case. And then something went wrong, and it was overrun with not necessarily zombies, but with, hostile people.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, but I'm not saying that, obviously, we didn't get the idea from BioShock. It kind of grew into that, and I don't see anything wrong with it being like that.
Sure.
But I just wanted to be the guy to say, hey, I'm going to some degree, whether subconsciously or on purpose, draw from my experiences in BioShock.
Okay.
Because they did it right.
That sounds great. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, because between the two of us, once the ideas get out there and we begin to workshop them and change them, we'll be genuine to ourselves, and they'll be 3 degrees different from where they started.
Exactly. And, if you think, there are countless quotes about everything being derivative or things like that, but every once in a while we run into that case where we come up with an idea that's original for us, and then one of us discovers that it exists already.
Sure. And we're
like, oh, well, they made it too, but like you said, it's completely different. It is a similar concept, but you could tell thousands of stories inside of BioShock, all, inside of that, the scope of this Deepvault / BioShock story, and it's still cool.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No. And I
think that's actually a very important point for this world building podcast that I accidentally got us to.
There you go. The thing that I want to focus on as far as the module, I said it again, and I thought, I'm not going to say the word, and I did it.
And he said module. Supplement.
The supplement we're coming out with from AbsoluteTabletop.com about Deepvault. Here is the angle, and you tell me if this is interesting to you. However and whenever the Titans fell. Okay? And we can explore the cool ways that a Titan's body would decay and what that would form and could be a part of the dungeon itself. And aside from those things, their creations, their inventions lived on in this vault. And they served a purpose. They continued to serve their purpose. They continued to have a will. And just if a greater being creates you, even if it's in a vacuum like Deepvault, if you're a creature with a will, you would still crave things like freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And you would still crave things like justice. And, you know, and I feel like there would be races in Deepvault. And I feel like this supplement should focus on what do they look like now? And how would they develop if the vault was sealed for that long and then somehow was opened? And maybe they spill out into the world. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care to spill out into the world. But the supplement focuses on those creatures and inventions. What do you think about that?
So the first thing I want to say is that a lot of times when I'm trying to come up with something like this, and I think that you handled it well, a lot of times, you know, when you watch a movie or you read a book, it's always the good part of the story. It's the idea. You know, you're following someone's life and you don't see, you know, you come in and it's a 27-year-old doctor, and that's when the movie starts. And the reason you didn't see the first 27 years of his life is because they were boring.
Right.
So in that same respect, a lot of times when I'm coming up with a story or I want to, you know, figure out why something happened, I always try to answer the question of what changed. Right. And in this case, to me, what changed is the vault opened. Why now? It's like, okay, well, the vault opened.
Exactly.
That's why this is important, is because prior to that, they were all living their own lives and everything was relatively okay. They were getting along. While they may have had these cravings or these wants, there was no other existence.
Sure.
It's not like a door that they were trying to open, maybe.
Right.
It's the kind of thing where something causes it to open, and what repercussions does that have?
Exactly. And in the realm of creative writing, that is the inciting incident. And that's what they say. They say, get as close to the inciting incident as you can. Because like you said, everything else is fat.
Yeah.
I don't care about the normal days this character had. I care about the interesting day when, say, the world blew up.
That's where the story starts for a reason. So, to answer your question, I love that idea, and I like the idea that... So, imagine immigrants, or before immigrants, because I feel like that's a word for people, civilized people moving from one place to another. People that, like societies that move from one place to another and how they developed. So, if somebody lived in a really cold climate and their culture moved to a really warm climate, they would obviously no longer wear very heavy clothes.
Right.
And they would say, you know, in like Alaska and other places, they bury like fish under the ground and ferment them. You can't do that in a hot climate. So things change. So imagine, I like the idea of there being races outside of Deepvault and races inside of Deepvault. And they're the same races. But after hundreds of thousands of years, however long has passed, the races on the surface have grown. You know, the Dragonborn have become more pointy, say, and the gnomes have gotten a little shorter because of a societal change, whatever.
Sure.
But in Deepvault, those things are different.
Right.
So there are Deepvault gnomes and, whatever races we want to put in there, there are Deepvault those things.
Yeah, I love it.
And then there are non-Deepvault those things. So it's like humans that live in Deepvault are going to look different than regular humans. They may even be called something different.
No, and I love this. So, all right, so here's where I'm thinking that I want to head with this, because everything you're saying is interesting to me. I want to just spitball with you a couple of things that I think are just cool ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the periphery of what you just said. Hopefully one of these can catch, what is it? The nuclei. Like if you just gave me a nucleus, these would be like atoms.
Exactly.
Am I science? Did I do that right?
No, you did that right, because the nucleus is the middle.
Right.
And the electrons
go
around it. And
the electrons.
Create atoms.
So
I'm
trying to throw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some electrons at this nucleus and see if any of them stick and start to rotate and make a living thing. First thing, love the idea that Titan technology is this absolute mashup of stone, almost Aztec style technology,
mm-hmm.
mixed with just that like Stargate, like glowing sort of energies and things like that.
Yeah, like a weird sort of ancient, but like postmodern, like ancient
like
alien technology. You know,
exactly.
Yeah, like futuristic is a good word. Like Stargate is the greatest example.
It really is.
You're like, that could be found in an Egyptian tomb, but it's shooting lasers.
And that's what I want to do is just walk that line. I don't want it to be that the players feel as though they've walked into a science fiction spaceship.
Yeah.
But I want it to feel like, because here's something that immediately popped in my mind. I want there to be this, the word is cybernetic that's popping into my mind, so I'm just going to use it as a placeholder, but I want it to be this cybernetic, ever-changing, ever-growing jungle. Now, I imagine all of this in the scope of this huge, tall ceiling.
And okay, so let me just take a step back, because for me and for anybody listening, there are a few things I think we need to hammer out that are fairly simple before we talk about it.
Okay.
So, where is Deepvault? Is that something we're saying or no?
Man.
We can skip over that, but there are a few other things we need to talk about.
So, here's the thing. If you asked me where it was, I would say it's everywhere underground. Depending on where you're at in the world, Deepvault doesn't follow the same planar rules as, how we would say, like, okay, here's sea level and here's gravity.
On land, exactly. It's not like built directly below everything.
No, I imagine
it's like the core of the world.
Well,
something like that.
Did you ever see? Yes, it's like the core of the world. That is a good way to.
It's like it goes down. They're not.
Did you ever play any of the Star Wars old games on the computer, like X-Wing or X-Wing versus TIE Fighter?
Yeah.
Do you remember how it was just dimensional space, that there was no up?
Yeah.
You would see different ships facing different ways, but everything was up to you because you were in space.
Exactly.
I don't want to get crazy with it, but I guess what I'm saying is that is sort of how Deepvault is. The physics of it and the way that it works is not quite crazy like an MC Escher painting or drawing or pencil sketch where like people are walking on stairs above you.
Yeah.
But the architecture and the gravity and the gravitons, these are... What? I'm science.
I don't know what a graviton is, but you used it like
science. No, that is a word. It's the particles by which the... No.
Is this a quit while you're ahead type situation?
Yeah. No, this is like... Let me tell you what situation this is. This is all the comments on this video are going to be on this only.
Thing. Any cool stuff we said.
Yep.
Tim, Graviton is this thing.
Graviton is a hero? No, he's a villain in the Marvel Universe. No. Apparently, gravitons are supposed to be the things that gravity is made up of or something.
Okay.
Somebody should Google that. Here's what I'm saying, though. I think that if there was a twisting corridor that literally spiraled slowly, I want somehow for that to not affect the players, that it's like, oh no, the walls are changing. It's like...
Well, exactly. So basically what you're saying is it's like space, where the person... It's like when you watch a video of someone going on a roller coaster. You don't see... Like, if you watch a video of the person, you don't see the outside. You only see them change. Like, their hair goes up in the air, but it looks weird because they're just sitting there. And then their hair suddenly goes up in the air. I imagine it's like that, where the players would never know. Like, if they're walking down the hall, everything feels like it could be regular.
Yeah.
If you explored all of Deepvault. But, like you said, in order to fit inside of the Earth, it's almost like, here's another word that we can use, like, not parallax, what's the other one?
That's a good one.
It is, but there's another word that's like...
JS?
No, what's it called?
All you developers out there.
Like fractal, something like that, where the idea is the way that it's created, it fills all of the space possible, but it's not linear. This is the least important thing about Deepvault. Can we just talk about?
Well, no, but it's not. You know why? Because here's the thing.
Because I think it's cool but hard to describe,
and that's what I'm looking for. Is that, to me, when you ask where is Deepvault, because that's a very important part. The geography, as far as where does it live on the map. It lives everywhere under the ground, because I want there to be some strange sort of... There was the way that this living vault was created was to grow and change to suit the needs of those within it.
Exactly.
But how does a living thing grow and change to suit the needs of murder, mayhem, death, failure? This thing, this vault, this utopian sort of hell starts to get darker and more evil
because
and murkier.
It's entirely it's influenced by the people in it.
That's
they
what
never
I think.
considered what would happen if they didn't consider a world in which anything bad would happen inside of Deepvault.
And that's what I love.
But then when it did, the machine, quote unquote, reacted accordingly.
Yes.
And they were like, "Oh, murder, okay." And then it's something.
Yeah, and I love that. I
crazy.
love the idea that the different things that have taken resonance and that have, become a part of Deepvault, literally shape and change the environment around it. And so that's not even to count the things that have dug their way in from the sides, or if they've gone too deep, the portions of Deepvault that might have ancient, evil entities that have burrowed up and from different planes and all this stuff. I want this to be a super dungeon in every sense of the word. You could never go through all of Deepvault because it's ever growing and ever changing.
Yeah, like
it's
by
this
design.
crazy-
Like that's
Yes.
the point. We're setting that up outside of the game. Like, no.
It's like
It's like trying to explore the whole of a plane. In my
Right,
mind, a
it's-
plane is not something that's like, yeah, well, this is one end, and we're going to walk all the way to the other end. It's like, no, it's kind of infinite.
Yeah, it's not Hawaii. You don't take a bus to the other side of the island and go, all right, we did it.
So, note that was supposed to be a quick question, but that was very important. The other thing is, okay, so in that case, I was going to say, how big is this? Now, I think we sort of answered that.
Yeah.
But the important thing being, that's what I want people to understand, is when I think dungeon, I think relatively small. Obviously not world size. This is almost like an entire plane, we'll say.
It really is
it's
essentially,
I think that is the best way to refer to it in terms of role-playing game rules, is it would be a different plane. It's not a different plane.
But that's
But
the
it
best
has
way
some
to
of the
mentally
properties.
correct. It's to categorize it in your brain.
Exactly. So, I don't remember what we were talking about before I mentioned that, but that's what I want to get back to.
Okay, well, I can tell you, I can't tell you what we were talking about before that. You can think about it, but I'm going to tell you that I feel like, well, I don't want to derail the podcast, but we have to do a couple of things that they have built.
Yeah.
We have to do a cut so that this module, I can't believe I did that again.
If I had time, I would write it on a piece of paper and tape it to my forehead so that every time he looked over at me, he would see the word supplement instead of the word module.
This
He'd do it anyway.
supplement that we're creating, it has to have a focus. It has to have a specific area.
Deepvault is infinite, but what are we focusing on here?
Yes, exactly. And to me, it is an area closer to the surface. Okay? It's an area that's closer to the surface.
It's a little less of the craziest.
Exactly.
Deepvault can get crazy, but we're like, hey, we're just scratching the surface.
Right. And just to throw you a bone here, you were talking about BioShock. I don't know if that was it.
No. We went beyond that, and then we talked about the opening of the vault.
Oh, that's what you said. The
this is what
Inciting
it would be.
incident. How did it open and why?
And that's what we were talking about. And then you were about to start on something, but we can go back to that.
Okay, because I really don't know why it was open. I don't know why, but I also imagine that something so big and infinite needs to have, if it really is truly a vault, is there one door?
No.
And it has to have multiple doors. It has to have multiple entrances.
Deepvault is a name, but I don't
imagine it as, because let's be serious, all of us were imagining a wheel on the door that looks like a captain's wheel.
Absolutely, like in like built into a cave wall.
Yeah,
like
and
just
it's
the most perfect, pristine
Yep.
bank vault door.
And then it opens, and it's like, how's it going?
There's an Absolute Tabletop supplement in there.
Whoa! It's glowing on a pedestal, like Indiana Jones style. So, to me, I like the idea that the front door didn't open.
Yeah.
I feel like if I had to say what is the most conflicted thing that could happen, something that would cause the most conflict, a door opens where the people or the things inside would never want it to. So I think
That's a good point.
I think it should be facing Grin.
Okay, so that touches on one thing, but I was going to touch on another thing about this.
Go for it.
So that's the where,
Yeah.
but that's not the why.
No.
Did you have an idea for the why?
I have
'Cause an idea for
I
why.
have no idea about the
All
why.
right. Now, this is going to sound tropey, and all you listeners, I say this to Tim all the time, and Tim says this to me all the time, and I need you to trust me. This is going to be cool, I promise. But, Like, that is the biggest disclaimer. Like, just stamp that baby. Because the easiest way to just, okay, so this, we're going to go on a short tangent about world building. You have to come up with the easiest way to convey an idea before you can build it. So I need to liken it to something and then make it ours. So I'm going to liken it to the vault not necessarily becomes self-aware, but realizes that in order to suit a particular need, it needs to open.
I love it.
It was never built to, but the idea is in its own sort of... I imagine it being non-sentient to a point.
Yeah.
Like, it's an algorithm. It decides certain things. And then something happens, the inciting incident. Something makes it say, hey, the next best thing to do is open the doors. Like, it wasn't made not to open the doors, but it was programmed in such a way that, I say programmed, exactly, like, it was devised in such a way that it's unlikely that it would ever open the doors. It doesn't make sense.
Sure.
That's not an option. But then, again, the Titans didn't account for certain things.
Sure.
So eventually something happens inside the vault or outside the vault, or something is going on. I also like the idea of the dungeon not realizing, Deepvault itself, we're referring to as a person now, not realizing that there is an outside world. So it's the realization and then the opening to the outside world. It's not like, I've been keeping everything in. It's like, no, it's this weird, ever-growing, fractal super dungeon that eventually realizes there's something else.
I love it. And I think that it shouldn't be a benevolent reason. By the time this super dungeon, this pseudo-sentient is what we'll call it. Because I don't, at least immediately, I don't imagine a HAL like, I'm going to open my vault, Dave.
Exactly. I imagine it like a self-learning machine that eventually, because it's never aware of itself and making opinionated decisions, but it is making more and more complicated decisions.
Not yet, because there's also, to me, Phase 8 is imagine what it would look like if a super dungeon full of rooms and technology the size of a Tarrasque stumbled across the world wreaking havoc. A living super dungeon made like this monstrous looking machine that was just spitting out gnomes and all this crazy stuff is just going across the countryside just wrecking shop. Because how do you stop that?
Exactly.
But for today, I'm not in love with this, but I'm going to throw this out there. What if the idea was it has reached what it believes is the pinnacle of the permutations it can create with the things that dwell within it.
And that's the thing, is I thought something similar, exactly.
It's aimlessly growing at this point. It's redundant. And it senses its redundancy. So when it can touch the outside world, it sees it as fuel to inspire growth. Okay, so now I just kicked James on the podcast.
He did.
Just remember what you were going to say.
Okay, I do.
Okay, you remember? An underlying thing, and you don't have to say this right away to the players, but an underlying thing is you have to, I don't know, maybe it's even seal up Deepvault. You have to be careful because if it opens too much, it will start to assimilate the outside world.
Yeah, like
it will start to creep into the ground and start Borg shipping the world.
Exactly, and again, that is a dangerous sort of idea to say because that's not what we're focusing on. But that is a cool plot hook, and we would have to figure out a way to say, okay, well, the physics of Deepvault plus the physics of the real world. That would create all sorts of problems.
Yeah, and that's stuff that we can get to later. But the idea is
that's what I like
it creates a sense of urgency. Here's how they found it, I guess is what I'm saying. What if there are small creatures and just different things that are being assimilated slowly? So you don't see this bird fly by. You see this strange Titan creature that used to be a bird, and it's reacting to the world in a foreign way. I don't know. I don't have it all worked out, but two environments are smashing into each other and it's not working.
Well, and exactly, and that's something that I like is I feel like you said, Deepvault eventually breaches the outside world. Now, it's not literally, it's underground and it grows out of underground. Something happens where there is again, the physics, it's not, to me, I don't imagine it physically taking place. You couldn't just dig all the way down through the earth and hit Deepvault.
Right.
And again, it's difficult to describe, and we don't have all of the answers, but I do like the idea of that barrier being broken in some areas.
Sure.
For whatever reason, where it is like, no, in that portion, if you dig far enough, you hit Deepvault. But it's almost like there's a tear in this weird planar, like imagine the TARDIS. Right. It's like that, where you can't just go behind it. It's the physics don't make sense.
It's bigger on the inside.
Exactly. So the idea being that you can't go into the back of the TARDIS without going through the front door. I feel like Deepvault is like that, but it breaks that boundary eventually in certain areres.
Sure.
And where it's like, oh, the door is over there, and from a perspective, like a physical perspective, this is where Deepvault is, quote unquote. Like, this is where we think, because I don't think people would have any understanding of this.
No, and we are definitely, it's getting thick.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to wade into that. Sometimes you got to say, okay, I'm putting on the galoshes and we're going to wade thick.
I just remember what we were talking about.
You. Tell me.
Do you remember?
No.
The things we need to cover in this supplement. You're like, hey, this is an infinite super dungeon, but we got to focus on a few things to talk about so that we can write this thing.
So we have two options right now. Okay? Because we're reaching about 42 minutes, which is that's kissing 45 minutes right now. Do we go into some smaller things that the Titans would have created? Or is that what the supplement reveals? Do we wait and let the surprise be, okay, here is a small surface closest to this realm layer of Deepvault, and here go some chambers and things, and here go some of the creations that the long dead Titans have left for us?
Okay, so I think that is the perfect idea. The idea that we don't go into any specific ideas, but this has helped you and I enough that we can come up with cool ideas for very specific things.
Yes.
But part of me wants to throw out a few examples to inspire each other.
Okay.
Maybe they may never make it, they may never exist, they may exist years down the line, but like to get a better handle on Titan technology, like, okay, what problems would they be trying to solve? Like, what would be a piece of Titan technology that they would keep down here, or that would, allow them to exist in Deepvault?
So for me, one of the things that would be an ultimate solution would be a super element that was sort of an all-in-one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a power source. It's a communication source. It's tough. It's malleable.
And it's plentiful or creatable.
Correct.
It's like
I wouldn't call it plentiful. I would say it's creatable. It is
something they can make.
It's a super alloy of the Titans. And the word that I would use for it now, sitting here, would be Titan copper.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our world, you've got these these copper jackals that are running around.
Yeah.
And they have, if you've heard any of this, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the point is they have these what are called jackal bites, and they are a special forces sort of team. And on their arms, they've got these different brands that looks like copper. To me, this Titan copper is what is in their arm.
Exactly.
That's why, and if you don't know anything about the copper jackals, I don't want to get too deep into this weird rabbit hole where I'm telling you all about them, but essentially, that means that this super element, in this one case, this is just one use, is used in their arms so they can almost be cerebroed, like Professor X style. Like you can tell.
MindNet style.
Yes. Like if you have a big chunk of Titan copper, you can see where others with the Titan copper would be. It's like a compass in a way.
Yeah.
It also, if you are proficient enough in it, allows communication. So think about the Titans would say, okay, it's a power source and a phone line. So not only am I going to power this weapon, but I can actually use it as a communicator as well.
Exactly.
So that's one of the things. So copper, or Titan copper, would be this element. And now it's rare. It's not something that's just, abundant down there, because there was a bunch created. There was probably sort of a perpetual, creation machine where they could just make this like a foundry, and no more. So it's a very rare mineral.
Okay. That's how Deepvault is powered, right?
Sure.
So what happens when Deepvault runs out of power, Tim?
Oh.
That's when the vault opens.
It's like, hey, we need to find Titan copper.
It's like, hey, I can't grow anymore. I'm running out of, and again, it's not a thing that understands this. It's just, it's built like, oh, yeah, if you run out of power, find power.
Yeah.
You know, if you run out of Titan copper, find... Now, that
The
doesn't
next
mean there
best
couldn't
thing.
be any in there. You know, obviously there would be plenty of things.
No,
But the idea
I think there
that,
should be a store of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the idea being that...
Talk about a MacGuffin.
It understands, yeah. The sort of programming, say, like we talked about earlier, of this super dungeon understands that it needs power to continue. So it goes looking for power. Like you said, that's where the assimilation of other things happens. And,
No, I love
and
that.
again, wading deep there, but that was like a cool little...
No, I love
like
this.
that. I'm so happy that was caught on audio.
if we don't do this way, I don't know a better way to do it.
There's not a better way to do it.
And I'm not the kind of guy that pores over a campaign notebook. I do best when we're just talking this stuff through.
And like little
this.
things here and there, like little pops.
Yeah.
So that is to say, okay, so Titan Copper. Man, there was another thing.
Well, and I'm gonna say this. Can I just point out that I don't care how long this goes.
Yeah, I don't either.
So if this is an hour and 10, this is important. It's important to fleshing it out. And you know what? Anyone can stop listening at any point.
So, and I think we have previously had a rough idea of something like this before, but things in the world, that the upper world, are Titan technology.
Yes.
People don't realize that. Some people
Correct.
may. But like, okay, the Copper Jackals who are not in Deepvault have Titan Copper somewhere.
Yep.
They probably use it for certain things, and other people now are Tome Hearts Titan technology?
Yes. Tome Hearts are Titan technology. In fact, I think the precursor to the Tome Heart should be in Deepvault. The original.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, proto.
Yeah.
Proto.
Like Frodo.
Proto Baggins.
That really literally just happened simultaneously. So
That's
okay.
how it gets to be an hour and 10 minutes, and I'm sorry to everyone listening.
Yep. I was honestly, we've kept this pretty dense. There's been
listen,
so
I'm not
few
upset.
jokes because I'm so
not
excited
upset
about
with
this.
This is the
So-
process. This is how we do it. So
all right.
yes, I think that should be the proto. I think they should be, if I had to make a mechanic for it, these things are level 30.
Ooh.
Like, not all of them, but there are things.
But like
where
that's
it's
that's the baseline. That's the point. Like
Yes,
hey, if
they
you see
are.
one, it's not.
The machinations of the ancients. They are the.
I don't think you're going to come up with a cooler line than that. You're like, you
Well,
can't
what
put
I'm
that
saying
one
is-
first.
They are. It is the. Well,
they
that's
are
what I'm
the
saying.
bros of the. I'm like, no, you're just not going to one up that.
They're the Titans of the Titans.
Ooh,
That
I think
was
it's pronounced Piton.
It is, and I never will say that.
Neither will I. That's so stupid.
Pitons.
Oh.
But here's and it's exactly a
Okay.
Beavis word. Pitons. But what I was going to say is these are the things created to serve the most technologically advanced race
Mm-hmm.
in the realms, in the planes. So this is the perfect representation of what they would want to serve them. The pickiest, most detailed, inventive race made these things.
Mm-hmm.
These proto-tome hearts. And way later, someone else sort of made like, okay, here's another version. And then
Yeah, like
way
exactly.
later, you know,
That technology was eventually. That's what I mean. In the world, in the campaign setting of Dragongrin, I imagine a lot of little things are descendant from ancient Titan technology, whether the concepts or the literal ideas. Like to make a tome heart would be very difficult and create, or would require a specific set of instructions.
exactly.
But other things like, oh no, we made this really cool lamp out of this, this really cool concept that who knows where it came from. Is like,
Right.
no, that's just Titans. It came from Titans, but people don't know that.
Yes. So to answer your question, I think definitely the tome hearts are Titan technology.
Awesome. Okay, so then that's in there. That might make the supplement.
Sure. I think that's definitely something we need to flesh out.
Okay. Honestly, I could talk about this for a very long time. Did you want to try to come up with a few more things that would be down there, a few more ideas about it? I think that this is all really good.
There's a big one, and I don't know if we want to reveal it. I don't know how we want to do it. Right? So there's something that James and I have been working on behind the scenes. I feel like now I can't not say it.
I was going to say, we have to say it, but we don't have to give information about it. Just stir the pot, man.
Well, how would you stir the pot? I feel like it's kind of a reveal, but what if it's
reveal it the way you told me about it.
Okay.
You pitched me on it. Like, it wasn't like, hey, that was not something we spitballed. That is a very, like, we made it better together, but that is a Tim idea.
Okay.
So just how you pitch it to me, and then let him ask questions. We don't have to answer them. It'll be in a supplement eventually, right?
And answer this the way that you answered it before you knew my answer. The question that I asked myself, what is the opposite of a dragon?
And yeah, Tim asked me that, and of course I'm sitting there like, I've read the whole monster manual, and I thought, I don't know, Tim, what's the opposite of a dragon?
So I'm actually going to put just a quick 5-second pause here on purpose. But I want anyone who's listening to this, genuinely think to yourself, what is the opposite of a dragon? Some people said a knight. I Googled it.
I didn't have an answer.
10 times. James didn't have an answer.
Because I imagined,
some people
like,
said a unicorn.
Yeah, I imagine, like, I've heard in a few, I don't know, settings or something, like, some people refer to dragons as worms. And to that end, I've seen literally, like, worms, like, from the book Dune. Like, it's called a great worm, but I'm like, it's not a dragon, it's a worm. And I'm like, correct. I can see that being an opposite. Like, it's underground, it doesn't have wings, it's whatever. And I was like, oh, maybe a worm, I don't know.
And so this was the concept. And this grew and changed, and here's the thing. We were talking specifically, this is after I had already come up with this concept. I think I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I figured out what the opposite of a dragon is.
Yeah.
Later, though, I didn't have all the details. I just was like, James and I were talking, and we thought it was the coolest thing. And so we were talking to Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice, and we were talking to Barker from Be a Better Game Master. And one of the things that Matt Click is so good at is building ancient lore without it getting thick and dense. So he builds these old histories of the world.
Yeah, like if we do broad strokes, Matt Click does the perfect width strokes. Like, it's just dense enough, but just vague enough that it's like, oh, I could see that being in an ancient book.
Exactly. You know what it is? Calligraphy.
Yeah. Like,
dude
hardcore.
Is like, it's calligraphy of just enough information of the history of the world.
Exactly.
Because I'll level with you. If someone hands me, like, hey, can you read the history of my world? I am dying inside. And I'll do it. Because, I want to be helpful, but I'm usually like, oh, here we go. Silmarillion.
Because it's not always exciting.
No, and it's usually not as crisp and well laid out. And anyway, all right, I'm done. I'm done stroking a fistful of Dice's ego. But the point is, in Matt's world of Aeronoth, there are a couple of times where dragons are a huge factor in destroying different things in the world. And there are great wars and great scorchings and things like that. And I thought to myself, the Titans. If these Titans were fighting the gods, because, and I'm not going to get it perfectly right, and I don't have it in front of me, and that's not the point of this podcast, but the idea is, if I'm not mistaken, I think when the gods bled, the dragons came forth, is what Matt has said. Or some variation of that.
Yeah, like they were an offshoot of the gods. They're like
right,
a
like
piece.
This. Yeah,
they're imbued with, they're these godly type creatures.
Yeah. So I thought, I don't think the Typhons would bleed and make this thing. I think the Titans would see that and they would say, we will come up with something. We will engineer something better.
I like the use of the word engineer, because that's what the Titans are all about. They're about, we can build something better.
Yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to create the perfect predator to your dragon. And that predator is something that we called a Typhon. And I think there should be at least some sort of Typhon in Deepvault.
Well, and specifically, and again, this is not entirely something we've spoken about. We knew the name, we have some ideas of the concept, but we've never talked about it in the two things: in the context of being engineered by the Titans, or in the idea, the context of being inside of Deepvault. So it's probably difficult, and I don't see it necessarily. They're not mechanical. I don't see them being mechanical whatsoever.
No.
But I imagine them being something that the Titans created in Deepvault.
Yes.
Like, that's where the birthing grounds are, say, or however it works. You know, whether they pull them from another dimension. However, we have no idea how Typhons are created. But it happens in Deepvault.
It does. And so I almost feel like it could be a big spoiler, I guess, ish. But I feel like now I want to at least fill out the concept a little bit so that people aren't surprised when something does come out about Typhons. I don't want to get too deep into it, but sometimes when you leave something that broad, it can create dangerous expectations. And people can say, well, I was expecting it to be this. This is what I imagine the opposite of dragons to be. So it's almost like, if you don't want to know, stop the podcast now. It's one of those where I feel like I want to at least lay out what we thought it should be.
Well, and that's the thing. It is certainly something we've guarded and held close, but I don't see it being a spoiler because whatever you say is going to be vague and broad.
Okay.
You know, I say go for it.
Okay, because that's the thing, is I don't want it to be something, again, that people have, then they start building it up in their mind what they think it would be, which is totally fine. Like, hopefully that's that what inspires I mean.
you. In the same respect, yeah, like all of this, the same could be said of all of this, and this Deepvault supplement's going to come out, and they're like, that's not what I imagined at all.
Right, and it probably won't be. But I want to make sure that it's, okay, here's what I'm imagining. If dragons are serpentine and lizard-like, I imagine Typhons being the same size, having wings, but I believe that they should be more mammalian. And they should. Now, here's the thing. This all boils down to the way that you depict it artistically.
And that's important, because we've worked hard on that.
We did. And we've been working behind the scenes with the artist Brendan Murphy to really nail this down. And we have actually some full paintings of some Typhons that I am so super proud of. Here's the deal, though. The Typhon that we focused on is a red Typhon, and it's lupine. It's very wolf-like. However, it still needs to have that sort of sinewy, muscled look with some of the fur coming. It's very touchy. You can't just make a wolf.
Exactly. It's not a werewolf.
It is not. It's like if the dragons were these serpentine creatures and that the gods were just using them to just decimate the countryside, that the Titans would create these lupine mammalian predators that would just take a dragon by the neck and strike it down. And I feel like it's just direct opposites. So if a red dragon is chaotic evil, then a red Typhon would be lawful good.
Yeah. And I think that's, so I think that is very, so just to dip into this briefly, and you can tell me what you think, but
sure.
The idea being, if they created them, I can't imagine that somebody would say, yeah, we're going to create a lawful, or we're going to create a chaotic evil being.
Right.
And just let it go. I imagine that it's like they created Typhons, and then they became a race. You know, it was like, It was something they created, but then it's like, no, I mean, they live.
They did live. And I imagine, like, as you get into different Typhons with the different colors and things, like a black Typhon, I think would be this enormous, almost like Ursa, like bear-looking thing with these huge wings. Again, not lizard wings, but these, not bird wings either. Yeah. That was like a rule when we talked to the artist. I'm like, we are not putting griffin wings.
We're not putting, feathers on them.
So it's almost these like membranous sort of almost bat wings that look.
They're Typhon wings. Like, it's so difficult to describe. Is Brendan, right? Brendan did a really good job. Now, when we're done on the subject of Typhons, I'd like to say one thing.
Sure. No, I think that's great. So, the thing I want to wrap up with is, we haven't fleshed it out fully. Okay, so I'm not going to get into every little tiny detail, but the idea was, if a dragon squared off with something, what would it square off with?
Exactly. What if two people were fighting and one side had dragons, what does the other side have?
Exactly. And that's not to say you should always have a 1-to-1 conversion. I was like, okay. But to me, I thought...
But like, that was the point back in the day.
It was like, if a dragon was on a ledge, I didn't want to see it squaring off against 4 fighters.
Yeah.
I wanted to see it squaring off against something that crawled up on the opposite ledge and that the dragon was afraid of.
Well, and because I feel like it's... The important part is the Titans would take the things that work about a dragon. Not necessarily that their serpentine nature doesn't work, but the reason they're so much like dragons is because they were engineered to fight dragons.
Right.
It's not like, okay, obviously they're not going to have a creature that can't fly to fight a flying creature. Like, no, there are certain things that were assumed when they began creating these things, because you have to. It's, if you're creating a thing to fight a dragon, it has to be strong enough to kill a dragon.
Totally. And that's so I think we'll wrap the Typhon portion of it up there and say that to us is what a Typhon is. Now, are you going to see a full living, breathing Typhon in the Typhon
in the Deepvault?
Are you going to see that running around Grin anytime? No. And
because how often do you see dragons?
And at best, you'll probably see maybe like the corpse of one in Deepvault, or like some dissected area.
That's the thing, especially on more of the surface where the supplement is taking place. It's especially like the hints of it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like little.
It's not just like, hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome. I'm the Typhon.
In
You're
a tuxedo.
Deepvault.
He's got the towel over his arm, and he's like showing you wines.
Typhon cummerbund.
But so if we're done with Typhons,
yes,
and you can't say anything else about them,
I won't.
I want to say the one word that excited me the most about that whole idea.
Okay.
Typhon-born. And we'll leave it at that.
Deal.
So, all that said, I think we have a really good idea of what Deepvault, this supplement about Deepvault, should be. Also, a really good context of how to write this supplement. Because again, with a super dungeon and a thing that we've just made this big, we obviously only have a certain amount of things we can write about. So we're going to cover some of the coolest stuff, plus some of the most important stuff, plus just lore about it. A lot of the stuff we talked about here will get firmed up and workshopped and put in there as a context for anybody that doesn't listen to damage reduction but gets the supplement.
Yeah.
But I think that this has been really big. This has been fun.
Yeah, it is, and
this is what damage reduction is all about.
It is, and I know we broke an hour, but I think it's a good hour. I think, like you said, it's dense, and it's
and really, this was like 100% us. And a lot of times we have a lot more time for an idea, but there's a deadline on.
Yeah,
like most stuff, we're like, we kind of. But I'm like, no, we need to come up with a lot of stuff for this because we need to write about it.
Right, and so we'll wrap up by saying this is because we needed to workshop what's going into a supplement. Hey, that is coming out on AbsoluteTabletop.com.
It only took an hour and 3 minutes. Folks.
I know. Well, because Tabletop Terrors is on deck. James and I are, I guess if you count us as Tabletop Terrors, we're a third of Absolute Tabletop, where we take turns project managing. And the project manager basically is the director of the movie. He says yes to things, he says no to things, and we're on deck for this. And we want it to be something that we're really proud of, and something that stretches us, and something that we put in the hands of other people. And it's inspirational and just so different from other things, but not so different that it's unusable.
Yeah, it will still fit in your fantasy game. You don't have to be running in Dragongrin to put some really cool Titan technology, say.
Exactly.
In your game or make it pop up. I think that'd be really cool.
So there you go. So that's what we're going to do, I guess, for this supplement. We're going to just take a snapshot of this part of Deepvault that has broken through the surface to find more energy, or to find more power, I guess.
Exactly.
Is really the idea.
Yeah.
So cool, man. Well, that felt good.
Yeah, that was really
fun.
Good.
It was a lot of fun.
I really was not looking forward to this. So I'll mention it again like I did before. We usually do all of our work on Sundays. We knew we needed to do this, so we had to get together on a day we don't usually work. And I worked all day yesterday and all day today, so I wasn't looking forward to more work.
Sure.
But this was worth it.
I agree. And listen, I'm of the mind that every once in a while, when you put yourself in a weird situation like this, it yields a different result. I don't know that we would have got this exact podcast on a Sunday.
And we wouldn't have. And the other important thing is, like you said earlier, there's no other way to get here except for doing this. It doesn't, even if it's not a podcast, talking to each other is the way that all of those ideas, because I think we both had really cool ideas.
Sure.
But it was the marrying of those two ideas and making one cooler idea that made it awesome. If I wrote Deepvault or if you wrote Deepvault, they'd be so different. But writing them together is like, no, I think this is choice.
It's super choice. And that's where, look, then you throw in just a sharp guy like Matt Click and a sharp guy like Barker.
Exactly.
And then, when we're putting these modules together and these supplements and these ideas, there's a healthy dose of iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
And we're all passionate about our ideas. And sometimes there are some sparks, but you can't sharpen iron without sparks. You have to have that sharpening each other. And occasionally it's like you think you have this really good idea until you show it to everyone, and then you're like, wow, you guys all just elevate it to an excellent idea.
Exactly.
And so
all that to say, we've done a lot of really cool stuff, but as soon as we put it to them and really going into the writing and editing phases of this supplement, it's only going to get better. And I'm so excited about that.
Me too. I can't wait to see how this actually turns out on the other side, because there's also something to be said of now having to take all this and write it down.
Exactly, but I'm so excited because it's just going to be so, because we are taking such a small slice relative to how big it is, that I think we can make a really cool, dense slice of a little bit of lore Deepvault and a few things just to wet the palates, man.
Love it. So, until the next damage reduction, we hope you enjoyed this bonus episode that is outside the normal episode count. And we're not even going to, I don't even think we should do an intro.
Yeah.
Right? So this is just
going blind, baby.
Yep. So, until you have the Deepvault supplement in your hand, may your dice roll high.